afternoon, folks. So, part 2 of the investigation into the recent Australian videos pushing fear out, where we tapped on to potentially they're using the ley line grid to cement that, based on the positions of where they actually carried out the recent protests, where there were just a lot of theatre police acting theatre. Protesters acting theatre. You could see it in the way that they were grabbing hold of each other, etc. And I ended with part 1 where I had mentioned that the idea of isolation is how the mystery school works. So I'll just further that slightly. So when you enter the mystery school, which I did in 1993, what's actually going on there then is the forces that operate in that system then sort of start to surround you, and what they're doing is isolating you from everything you know, everyone you know, and putting their own people around you. That's how the mystery school works. Now, as I've said before, it's a spiritual test, the whole thing. It's a 7-year, well, my experience was 7 years, and it's not something you would wish to go for unless you want to jump into this current system and raise yourself up in it. So isolation is a major aspect of how you can get an idea that these networks are around you. So for instance, if all of a sudden you've got new people around you, the energies are changing and you're feeling like you're being isolated, you're being encouraged to stop seeing people you used to see, to know friends you used to know, then you are under the spotlight of one of these various magical groups. So once you recognise that, if you're lucky enough, what you need to do then is look at who's being put in your mix. Because what you're seeing there then is all the people that are involved in that particular magical group. The only way you can remove that from moving forward is to prevent them from coming into your home. Do not take anything off them, i.e. key rings, keys, gems, any sort of magical instrument that they could have charged up, which they go about filling your house with. So under your carpet stairs is an important one for them, because you're constantly walking past it. So whatever they've charged up, whatever it is they've placed there, is constantly hitting you when you walk past it. Bathrooms are another, because there's water involved that enhances the magic. So that's where they operate and how they operate, and isolation is a big part of that system. And just as an heads up, if you're entering the mystery school at any point, if you are obsessed with your bloodline, you've had it. They'll have you, because they'll pull you in by you getting excited egotistically on the history of your own bloodline. Well, if you want to be the history of your bloodline, that's fine, go ahead. If you want to remain sovereign, independent, and your own man, accept that your bloodline has given you the abilities and capabilities that you've had that got you to that point, but that's it. Okay? That's it. You don't want any more interest in where your bloodline's been. It doesn't matter, unless you want to be a particular ancestor and bring that back forth. Then you can reactivate the memories that are in your DNA. So, word of caution if you're entering the mystery school: before you enter it, if you're obsessed with your bloodline and potentially the history of it, I'd keep right out of that, because you've had it. There's only one exit for you, and that's joining the ranks of the New World Order. If you're not, however, jump in. That'd be my advice, and make sure you don't get trapped in any of the castles on the way, where they give to you the entire paradigm of a particular desire, whether that's money, whether that's sex, whatever it is, intrigue. If you want a bit of a symbolism on that, then think of the film Highlander. I think it was back in the 80s. Freddie Mercury, the Queen, created the soundtrack. Brilliant film. Well, it's actually showing you that there can be only one. There's only one true part of you inside, and you look at those he had to defeat to bring that. There can be only one into play. He had to defeat the other aspects of self. So you had the black guy who represented the animalistic nature, the women, the dance. You had the sleuthy kind of guy that he fought in the car park. That's another side of humanity. So these are all the parts that they're showing you that are within you. And the mystery school is basically trying to trap you by definition of one of your particular desires having control over you. And so you'll enter, and well, I mean, a lot of people get stuck in the first castle because it's generally the one they know that is most prominent in your character. And you'll enter that thing, and if you get picked up with it, you'll stay there. You know, you might stay there for a little while, you might stay there, you might get trapped in it. I was lucky, I went through each and every single one, saw it for what it was, and exited it, only to go into another one. So that's, you could say, a Grail Castle kind of symbology in relation to how that works. So, isolation, biggest key pointer to the fact you are under the spotlight of one of these magical groups. Now, what I'm going to do now is begin where we ended in part 1. And we are going through, as I've said, Frater 616's memoirs in relation to Satanism in his home country of Australia. So he says, debauchery as a science is taught and maintained by programs, strict in nature and observance. Rituals are conducted, thought patterns established, relationships destroyed and dependencies enhanced. So there you go. That was the paragraph that prompted what I've just discussed about in the school, because it is the methodology. And if you're aware of that, you might not fall down the pitfalls and enter into the control. And then it says, psychopaths are studied and emulated. Now that's very important as well, because you could class these demonic as psychopathic, as in they don't have any conscience. That's been removed from as a spiritual judgment. So anybody that's possessed by that nature is obviously going to show the signs of psychopaths. They're the ones that head the orders, and therefore all your slays and your initiates are being encouraged to copy the psychopath. So that's because you have to be psychopathic if you want to succeed in this system, because you are removing all sense of morality, responsibility for the pain and the stuff that you're creating against others in order you can satisfy your own personal greed, needs and wants. Psychopaths are studied and emulated. That, I know, again, is a very important factor if you're thinking of entering these things, because ultimately that's what they're aiming to turn you into. Some of the deadliest, most effective and disarming assassins are women. Within the Alpha Lodges, they are worshipped as embodiments of the Dark Goddess, who is known by many names and is virgin still. Now, what you've also got to remember, and this is very important, that the fallen creatures, the ones that left their estate, they are mimicking the actual creation. That's what they do. If you've studied the Norse theology, you get a great sense of that through studying Loki. You know, he's a mimic of. But in a lot of cases, a lot of what he has to say and bring is valid as well. So the more that humanity takes on the mimic, the more you're going into that and off the actual creation. And this is how it pulls in, you see, you know, because you're finding this doctrine in your chosen, as it were, and accepted theological existence. Currently, the outer head of the Alpha Lodge, Australasia, is a very high-placed and successful federal politician whose satanic name is Bestia. So obviously, whoever this person is very involved in bestiality. I mean, of course, this was written pre-2003, 4. So remember, when he says currently, you'd have to put your mind back pre-2004 just to be on track and not be presenting it to the incumbent as present. The inner head of the Alpha Lodge, Australasia, is the highest Crown Service operative in the Commonwealth. And then in brackets, having replaced former Crown Service agent and Greek princess Ekaterina, aka Sheila Fraser. Together with time, those at the highest echelons of international Satanism believe that there is nothing they cannot achieve. And if you knew even half of what they have already done, you would actually agree And I would concur with that also. And this is due to the mimic, the methodology of mimicking the actual creation. So they're tapping into what's inherent inside of you, but moving you off on a slant. Ask yourself whether you have not noticed a number of world tendencies coalescing around the inevitable, that the social fabric is no longer made of whole cloth, and that politicians everywhere are becoming more brazen and extreme in their prescriptions and accomplishments. Should long ago have left little pause for thought, but it didn't then and doesn't now. The modern media is a pastiche of sex and soft eroticism. The Western world's drinking water has been laced with chemicals that exert powerful effects over time. Rates of depression, suicide, incest and bank interest continue to rise, but no one bothers to join the dots. What do all of the following people have in common? Norman Lindsay, Sir William McMahon, Garfield Boric, Lionel Murphy, Rosalind Norton, Clyde Cameron and Stephanie Bartholomew, aka Abigail. From where do more Australians get their news and why? What is Michael Aquino's interest in Australia's Pine Gap facility, and why is discussion of the base's use and purpose inadmissible within Australia's polite society and media? I believe in one prince, Satan, who reigns over this earth, and in one law which triumphs over all. I believe in one temple or temple to Satan, and in the one world which triumphs over all is the world of ecstasy. And I believe in the law of the aeon, which is sacrifice, and in the letting of blood, for which I shed no tears, since I gave praise to my prince, the fire giver, and look forward to his reign and the pleasure that are here to come. Now, when you understand the idea of sacrifice in religious ritual, you know if you're dealing with the real creation, because the sacrifice is something that you have to endure. You have to give up something. These guys are talking about sacrificing somebody else for their blood. Naturally, then you are calling out the opposite to the creative entities, and you're into this satanic stuff. It's basically how it goes, you know. Spiritual evolution is self-sacrifice. Egoic sacrifice is picking up something else. Okay, remember these things. These are important. A number of Crown Service agents in Australia were relieved on the evening of the 19th of December 1967. A number of the President's men in Australia were quietly celebrating as the clock struck midnight on the 11th of November 1975. Both intelligence agencies had relations which were still trespassed by the ghost of Dr. Ward. Both reacted to these events because of Australian Satanism. In the first case, because HRH Queen Elizabeth II would be saved embarrassment, and in the second, because Gough Whitlam was not one of them. On this point, I am in no doubt. Sir John did his duty to the Princess and inner head of the Alpha Lodge, Australasia, and Sir Garfield explained it. Now, 1995, remember, is also the year that the collection of dead souls, or birth certificate creatures, was shifted from the British Crown back to the Spanish Crown, which they lost in 1604 when it was given to James I from the amalgamation of the Scottish and English thrones. So 1975 is an important year. Things are changing in relation to Crown, Commonwealth, and again, 1975, we can see here that they're getting rid of a lot of people that wouldn't play along with this shift, whatever that may be. Most people do not know that J.W. Howard's first overseas trip as Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australasia was to receive his 33rd Masonic degree, for in matters of his true faith he manifests a decidedly disillusioned romantic apprehension. He is the perfect example of parallel lives, and a compliant media well and truly out of their depths. The same could not be said for Harold and his parties, in the fact that people were noticing, and indeed Sir William was invited. You have little if any idea of the history, connections and the network of Australia's sinister lodges. The temples within them are or their adherents and puppets. Why are some politicians spectacularly successful and others dogged at every step? How was the New York-based public relations firm paid by John for doing such a good job in the elections? Has anyone bothered to check the Commonwealth of Australia Department of Treasury records? And would they know what they were looking for? I became out-head of the Alpha Lodge Australians in the same year. A meteoric rise to power brought a change of federal government, with a Prime Minister whose relationship to Satanism was tenuous, pedestrian at best. But then again, he liked to play around and a number of our special people were happy to accommodate him for a price. He craved respect and understated admiration and received both from us for the efforts he expended. I left the Alpha Lodge as best as one can and tried to reclaim a more mundane, if no less ingratiating lifestyle. I operated a media company, publishing anti-Christian tractates, political pamphlets and pornographic videos, working for a number of organisations internationally. The extreme right wing of Britain had recently been infiltrated by a very old and isolated left-hand path tradition, and this sinister development augured well for the Alpha Lodges, although today David Myatt is considered more of a prophet than a representative of the Hedomadre magical system. While the Order of the Nine Angles pursued a more open approach in the United Kingdom and increasingly in the United States of America, in Australia we still work just out of view. The strength of international Satanism continued to increase as its oldest families continue to wither. In the real world, money gives power, and those best placed to dictate the money markets always win. Yet their magnetism glamour have faded, and their futures are more tenuous than at any other time. Their collective days may be drawing to an end. So this is your old money systems he's talking about there. Their most enduring legacies will be the power structures they created and the relationships facilitated. Their funding of diverse groups dedicated to the destruction of Christianity is a story never to be told. Their most successful recent social campaign was the Please God, Don't Let the Priest Rape Me Again effort in the late 1980s, to date, and the promotion of lilac seminaries. Modern post-1980 Satanism is the result of some hard-learned truths and well-practiced procedures. Everyone knows that we are becoming more obvious. There are decreasing reasons to hide. The world of high fashion, always a glittering ephemeral chimera, became an overtly successful recruiting ground for sweet young things, with a daring and glamorous nature. So there's your models, etc. You don't really want to be pulling your children into this celebrity culture at all. Multi-billionaires increasingly sought the spiritual comfort and insider information the Satanic Alpha Lodges could provide. What most people do not realise is that Satanism is a ritually based practice, and that this repetition has over time left strong impressions upon the morphic field. This reinforces security and comfort within the left-hand path's true adherence. So this is what they're feeding on. Politically, the libertarianism of Twain that permeated Satanism gave way to the realisation that the sheeple do not want freedom. They are happy to build their own pens. 2,000 years of Christianity has left them domesticated. So Satanism began taking to itself right-wing positioning, farther and farther in afield. In any event, all bank vault doors swing open to the right. All the leaders are dictators, and the sheeple eat from their hand, just the way they like it. Now free of its earlier hallucinations, fully accepts the pathetic nature of the human condition, wrapped as it is in the gaudy packages of superstition. Satanism finally managed to infiltrate the major left-wing and middle-of-the-road political parties on May Day 1997. Well, who did we get in here? Who did all the those that require free money vote for? Well, New Labour, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, yeah, Alistair Campbell, spin, lies, bullshit, deception, and mass murder through war. So 1997 again, as is a pivotal point. May Day is their satanic high priest. It's their Christmas Day, if you will, their New Year's Day, all rolled into one. which is why many massive organisations such as the Soviet Union all May the 1st, because they are mimicking. Remember this. You know, the quarter days are not by definition evil. There are times when communication between the earth people and the ancestors of the land and earth spirits, etc., become in communication and reinforce the age and ancient old agreements between man, nature, and the other realms. They obviously, as I've said, mimic, so they utilise everything that's found within creation and turn it asunder and reverse it, invert it. So that's Satanism. So, you can see that you've got to keep in mind that this system mimics the existent and original. And this is how they get away with it, because they're using a lot of doctrines that you'll find within the actual creation myth. If you're not savvy with this idea of inversion, unless you really put in the study, the research over many years, you are always going to fall victim to the traps. Which is why you really have to be a sovereign critter. Take on board what other people say, what you've read, etc. But ultimately, you've got to dissect it and come to terms with it, evaluate it within yourself, and go that way. If you're ignoring your inner self, you are taking on somebody else's idea of what something means. And of course, if they're incorrect, you're just following on and embedding something that is false in the game, and then expecting good results. It's not going to work. When I was in the mystery school, a lot of the study was Kabbalah, and I did quite a lot of it. And I always write things down, if I want to learn something, because it does seem to go in a bit better. But the simple fact was, by the time I'd got maybe 5 years into the mystery school, I knew that my inner self wasn't comfortable with this magical system, the Kabbalah system, and so I did not enter ritual magic. Some might say, yeah, but you might be wrong. Exactly. The only way you can actually seriously take on to learn what is and what isn't is by pulling out everything within that ticks the boxes that makes you think, okay, as far as I'm aware at this point, that is correct. I'll move with it. You move with it. Now, you do that also knowing full well that if there are errors in your grasp, your understanding at that point, then by going through the mechanics, going through it with how you know it, at the other side you will come out with the errors. They'll show themselves to you. And this is how you can disregard them. And you're purifying your knowledge base, your path. And, then it's worth passing on to others so they can get a bit of an idea of how best to operate when you're dealing with this kind of stuff. It's not about being correct always, because the one thing I've learned in this many years of spiritual study is you can go 5 years studying a particular realm of a body of knowledge, and as you get into the pinnacle of it, or you would think, you're thinking you've sort of completed that, another door opens and you enter another realm at the beginning, and everything you've just achieved appears irrelevant because you're doing, and you're going on the cycle. If you're going up the spiral, then each time you've entered and then ended that cycle, you've entered the next cycle with the body of knowledge that the previous one had. So that by the time, same again, you'll go through, you get to the end, you'll think, whoa, and then back to the beginning. And that is the cycle as you goes on the spiral upwards. If it's getting worse, you're going on a spiral downwards. You've got to see this. Most people, of course, are in the middle on the merry-go-round, jumping neither off, down, or is it up, because they're just terrified, mesmerised by the nonsense that they live, and they don't move anywhere in the world. I think if I could say, looking back at my life, went into the mystery school, you're going down there first, so I had to see the dark in order to know the difference. That's what it's basically about. So whichever way you're going, some people go in high, so they seem to be being successful in everything they're achieving. But, that's only one part of the game for them. At some point in their life, they're going to see the other one. It's the way it goes. So there again, you can lessen the idea of judgment on folk, because it doesn't matter what they're building for themselves. It's irrelevant. Just remove yourself from the damage that it might cause, and then because you're aware of the situation, because that's how they're going to learn. They're building this thing up. If it's all false, it's going to collapse, and the bigger the falsity, the bigger the collapse is going to be. This is the idea of karma. This is how it works. It's not an evil thing. It's the balancer. It's teaching you. It's teaching you the error of your ways, if you are taking note. Your conscience is also your spiritual, moral code, constantly keeping your movements, thought patterns, etc. on the right track. Because ultimately your conscience is trying to keep you spiritually sound. The more you debase and ignore your conscience, then obviously you need to recognise as well that you are actually going down the hill. And if it's a choice that you're happy to go along with that stuff, then at least know that that is where you are. You don't kid yourself, because it doesn't serve you to kid yourself. The idea, I didn't know, doesn't carry. It does in primary school, because they're children and they're learning. But when you're an adult and you're responsible, which I think the biblical tells you you're responsible for your own behaviour at 14. So naturally, as a child turns 13, things change. A spiritual change has happened where they're now responsible for their own behaviours. This is important stuff that's been lost because they're shifting in this garbage system where they need you all dumb, thick, debauched, and operating more and more heinous behaviour. This is where you're going. You're doing it all by yourselves. And, I can talk to you a lot. I talk to a lot of people out there and they're going, oh, it's terrible. Well, is it? Because you're doing it. You're actually the one playing a big part in making it happen. So you're crying on the one hand, but moving it in on the other. Because you haven't took responsibility for that in yourself. You don't take responsibility for your own energy that you're inputting into this world. Satanism finally managed to infiltrate the major left-wing and middle-of-the-road political parties on May Day 1997. Another group long ago bought the American Congress, so the Alpha Lodges concentrated on the Republican Party. So here you can see you've had your Bushes, now you've got Trump, who was actually a Democrat before. So they've just obviously brought Trump into the system, which we can see. If you stop paying attention to QAnon and look at what's going on in the Middle East, there is Trump's actions. I can't contradict Americans for actually feeling like Trump is doing something good in America, because he probably is. But if you want to look at his real core agenda, you've really got to look at what he's doing in the Middle East. That's where it's at. That's his actions. That's his fruits. And he's bringing this system in because this system is the no-hide platform. People need to understand that it's pure Satanism, pure, unadulterated Satanism. And the consequences of it being implemented will be severe. You can get an idea, this is only the forerunner. With your masked up and social distancing bind that you're all jumping on. So it's the Alpha Lodge is concentrated on the Republican Party, and this has paid some very high dividends. So this is 2003. The dividends are amazing now when you look at what Trump's achieving for the priesthood. Currently, the US federal government dances to our tune, a couple of steps removed. So he's claiming that Australia is actually running the Federal Reserve System through the Alpha Lodges. He says, the federal government dances to our tune, a couple of steps removed, if you know what I mean. Within the left-hand path, Satan is the supreme prince. The hierarchy of hell begins with the prince. He is the other, the bright fire giver and illuminator. He is the only God who cares. Satanism is a spiritual Darwinian theory based on predation. So they're telling you that they're predators. You are. You are the victims. So your social distancing, your mask wearing, it's all part of this predation. They're circling you now, herding you off into your little corrals of nonsense. And they're just going to wipe the floor with you. Devoted Satanists dedicate themselves and their sex acts to the Dark Lord. Prayers are said, chants intoned, and invocations recited, all as the basis of obtaining the blessings of hell, the Quillapothic realm. Unknown, if not always, unsuspected infernal temples exist in every major city throughout the world, Vatican City included. Now you've got to remember the Jesuits control the Vatican. Now the Vatican lost all its power in 1929. Okay, the Holy See remains the holder of all the titles, all the lands and property afforded to Rome. So you've got to see this about the Vatican. The Vatican has to be demolished, it has to be removed, and everything that the Vatican's collected, i.e. title, lands, possessions, has to be moved into the Noahide system. With your consent, by the way, which you do every time you use the surname. Every hour of every day and every night, people are knowingly engaged in Satan's service, human sacrifice, whether ritually and quicker or slowly and degradingly over time, is all harnessed to specific ends. Politicians are introduced by a carefully graded set of criteria and situations that enable them to accept that their victims will be our little secret. Young children sexually molested and physically abused by politicians worldwide are quickly used as sacrifices. In Australia, the bodies are hardly ever discovered, for Australia is still a wilderness. Now, so he's telling you that the politicians are totally caught up in this, and this is where Epstein comes into play, and the networks like the Epstein network, where they can then blackmail everybody into keeping in tune. Overseas, cremation is the favoured method, and although the Satanic Alpha lodges of Australia have access to crematoria when needed, this is surprisingly rare. Believe it or not, many bodies are dumped over the side every week in a number of isolated bushland settings. The emerging set of Satanic leaders is young, savvy, competent and heartless. They are masters and mistresses of their emotions and their intellect. Many are involved in business, politics and the legal profession and the arts. They are affluent, mobile and stylish examples to the next generation, and therefore to the next generation of Satanists, that power is glory. Lust is nobility and liberty is the highest ideal of the new world man and woman. Now that's interesting, because I'm just watching something now called Power. Definitely a black funded created series that is showing. It's interesting because the lead role is a guy called James St. Patrick, and his underling is a white guy called Tommy. So you can see the roles are reversing now, and putting the white guy underneath, while still claiming that the white people are supremacists. So, you know, you might fool the numpties out there with this Black Lives Matters nonsense, but you're not fooling anybody with a bit of intelligence, and you're certainly not fooling me. Okay, it's just a lot of shit and garbage, and through the hip-hop scene, which is very connected to this system, they've managed to drag so many of the youth into this twisted culture, whatever the fuck it is. It's disgusting, and it needs to be understood as such. Yeah, they use debasement of the victims as a ritual of power to themselves and their deities. So by celebrities giving you these satanic offerings in the videos, they are capturing your energy and they are giving themselves power. We've explained that in the first one. It's all about harnessing energy, and whatever you focus to, you are giving the point of focus your energy, and that's what they utilize. This is very important that you understand this. Very important. All of them are dedicated to creating the new men and women of the future and to surpassing the old ones. Beginning in Sydney in the late 1980s was a now international underground sadomasochist society founded by Satanists. Victims are abused to death in grotesque rituals held in secluded chambers throughout the global metropolis and never-ending suburbs and bewildered housing estates. Although many who attend are unaware of anything except their ability to fulfill special needs and cultivated tastes, all of these gatherings are satanic in nature and magical in purpose. So again, working with the ley language, which is what Satanism does. All the satanic altars have to have a dead body beneath them. I worked for John Lang's in the late 80s, early 90s, and we were carrying out a contract in Burnley on a town centre church, and all things had to be stopped immediately when they found a dead body under the church altar. So, has it always been so? Or as the church has been infiltrated over the many centuries, as a big part of that infiltration being to unwittingly place dead bodies under the altars, so that whatever is then achieved in that service, even by unwitting priests and vicars it could be, are feeding the satanic system. This is where the inverted Kabbalistic tree comes into play, because that is a natural consequence of that position. The advent of sadomasochism as an accepted form of expression is due to the efforts of Satanists in subverting normalcy and inverting mainstream Christian values. The S&M Society was used as a recruitment ground for some of the most perverted geniuses I have ever met. And with the advent of the World Wide Web, extreme hardcore bathroom sex came into its own as a subgenre to be taken seriously. Today, such stars as Alexia Cage and her growing number of friends are enjoying careers that would have been inconceivable but a few short years ago. Indeed, many toilet sex starlets are committed Satanists and Alpha Lodge members or affiliates. Be careful when you're out clubbing, people. A lot of these young girls that are encouraging into the toilets for sex are part of these magical cults. And you see, magical energy transfers through saliva of the female, especially if she's aroused. I mean, I came across a lot back in the day, in the 90s, while clubbing, etc. But obviously I was very savvy with this stuff and knew it for what it was. By their presence in the world, does the Prince of Darkness achieve his aim of exporting enlightenment into the objective universe? Concomitantly, restroom magic continues to develop its own left-hand path technique, in which the conveniences serves as a representation of and chalice unto the goddess, by way of only one example. Today, in co-educational facilities throughout the Western world, bathroom sex and flute playing are rampant across all age groups. Thank you, High Priest Monica and White Witch Fiona. Yeah, this is why they're teaching your children sex at age 5. This is why they've put out Harry Potter. Everything is about debasing your children and shifting them into this platform as their norm. Yeah, first they had to destroy the family and get rid of the male. You see, it's all boom, 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 boom. But while you're playing out there in La La Land, you're missing everything, and children are just being debauched. The people of the world are easy to manipulate. Homo sapiens are herd animals. After all, it's all colour and movement when it comes to the masses. Give them an election with no policy choices, and for the most part they're happy. Allow their children no real prospect of success, inhibit their natural drives, particularly their sex drives, limit their options, coarsen the choices, and society, such as it still is, quickly falls apart into predetermined categories. No families, just weak individuals, free to do as they are told. So he's telling you what's been implemented. Here you are today. Social distancing, wearing the mask, and doing everything the television tells you to do. Satan is a wonderful systems man. Already there are rampantly individualistic spiritualities spreading throughout the world. Souls and agendas are kidnapped with ease and Luciferian style. Rock and roll, gods and goddesses captivate the hearts and minds of the next generation. The boldness of the black metal musicians, magicians, and the mantras they spread still excite and amaze me, even after my achievements. Now, that's interesting. I mean, I adore the music of the Rolling Stones and even Led Zeppelin, but it's satanic. You really have to understand that when you are taking on that energy, you are allowing this energy to envelop you. And for the next few days, you've flooded your system with these mind thoughts, these patterns, and you will find yourself perhaps doing things you wouldn't do, reacting in ways you wouldn't do, but very subtly. It's a subtle play, this. So you've got to be aware of this. You have to cleanse yourself. So you always you'll be looking to cleanse your aura, your auric field, and remove these little attachments that are constantly being thrown at you from people that are involved in these systems, you see. Keeping people out of your house is the most important part of keeping your home cleansed. So it is important that you understand who it is that you are around. And, if you don't have spiritual protection, then you need to really learn this, because you need to keep right out of the way altogether when it comes to allowing a lot of these little numpty ones to throw things at you. And you need to learn that yourself. Otherwise, it's just going to get a lot worse as the quillipothic realms empty. Move into this one and looking for energy sources. That's you out there who are now all so depressed in your energetic system. You are such an easy target. It's just ridiculous. If you want a symbolism of that, look back to the film The Matrix, where the agents can use anybody. Yeah, they can move into anybody that's at that frequency. I learned this while being involved in the club scene, promoting clubs and DJs. And you can see the same demonic soul flipping through anybody it chose when you were around those kind of people. Now that's an important thing to sort of recognise. Otherwise, you're just lost, and everything's just you've no idea. Everything is scientifically explainable when you start to recognise the parts of life that you've been taught since you were born to ignore. Satan is a wonderful systems man. Already there are rampantly individualistic specialities spreading throughout the world. Souls and agendas are kidnapped with ease, and Luciferian-style rock and roll gods and goddesses captivate the hearts and minds of the next generation. The boldness of the black metal musicians, magicians and mantras they spread still excite and amaze me, even after my achievements. It is important that you recognise this stuff. Advertising continues to chip away at acceptable standards, such that nowadays almost anything is realised as being eminently possible. The foreign policy of the world's only superpower is directed from Israel, and our work is now running on autopilot. Okay, so what it's telling you there, this guy, is that the Alpha Lodges are Israel, the Noahide system, okay? And that system is completely controlling the world's greatest superpower. And remember, this is back before 2003. He talks about the Republicans. Let's not forget that the Democrats also are part of this game. They're all satanic, all of them. And you can blame the success they had with the Alien script back in the 50s, where they basically, through the 60s, took over the entire American government on the fear that they needed to hand over power to the secret government that was dealing with these dodgy extraterrestrials. Kissinger were involved. Okay, that's what happened in America. That's the power of the alien script. Yeah, they're not alien to this place, and they're not alien to the story of humanity. Okay, they're alien to this dimension because they don't have a physical body. But they're not alien to you, the story of man. Okay, we are interconnected, and this is why I decry the current extraterrestrial agenda. It's nonsense. Okay, if you suck into it, it serves you right. The Alpha Lodge has taken steps to try to ensure that after the next war, the tradition is maintained in the intervening centuries, before civilization as we know it begins again. At that time, Satanism will be the only religion and science. We have secured the textbooks, relics and magical weapons necessary for our Dark Lord, and I see the storm clouds gathering. Ritual activity is increasing, social structures are almost totally eroded. The sheep will gather for the slaughter. The sheep will gather for their slaughter. This is person killing the creditor by consent. There is no crime. Vindex walks amongst us now, and very few know it, or think they do, or think that they do. Vindex walks amongst us. The other, beyond that, attracting, transforming, forbidden essence, contradictory defiance, challenging in its purest, answering, archetypal, shape-shifting form, the fascination that creates, nourishes, destroys and redeems, the Prince of the Earth, the Lord of the Air, the darkness of the deep, and the God of Fire. The majestic potency, force, presence, power, magic of the name of the one known by many. Intoxicating, subversive, eternal. So he's just bigging up his prince there. The other, that arrogant, inspirational quest and elegant undercurrent to a superior life of overcoming. Everything you have never dreamed of, and more than your deepest nightmares. The alarming, awful, sinister, dispossessed delight of the empowerment of knowing. The triumph of ecstasy reflected in your imagination, honour, genius, and terror. Rebellion, liberty. The other, that banished suspicion and apprehensive silence, trespassing in disguise, a question and an accusation, the fear and celebration, the shadow and horror unknown of life and death, of aeons past and potentiality, of willing and becoming and exalting in this life. Hail myself that I seek to be. And then he goes into another prayer to his critter. Okay. Now, from the perspective of not falling for this nonsense while in the mystery school, I can see that because they've gone along with the left path always, they think this is the only way to be knowing, that it has to be satanic. Well, I can assure you that's not the case at all. You can be knowing and still in tune with the creation, okay? Spiritually in tune. That's the important bit. And you can see these people, as smart as they are and as powerful as they are, it's only a power in this realm. That's where they've gained the power, the sacrifice of the spiritual. So everything they've done in their life and enjoyed, it's not a free ride. Okay, it's not a free ride. So we're obviously not going to vocalise any of this prayer nonsense to this shit. Now, it stops there and goes to Australia's Global Satanic Legacy and Future Part 2. So this is Part 2 as a video. So we'll leave Part 2 of the script for Part 3 and another video. So with that, I will say till the next time.